Be here this morning and speak on the report stage of Bill C-86. Obviously, the news this morning with General Motors, their workers and their families are in our thoughts, and our government will do everything that we can to support them during this period. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are an ambitious lot, and they expect the same from their government. They expect us to be ambitious, they expect us to be bold, they expect us to be trailblazers. In this globally competitive world that we work in, we operate in, and we compete in, we know that Canadians can compete. We know that they can succeed globally, and that's what they're doing. But we also know that our strong economic performance, Mr. Speaker, is not only about a strong economic record or performance, it's also about ensuring that all Canadians benefit from strong economic growth. And our government's been bold on, yes, pursuing policies that will ensure a robust and strong future for our economy and our workers, and help those middle-class Canadians working hard, and yes, help those wishing to join the middle class and working hard, but also ensure that all Canadians benefit. And that's what our government has been about since we've been elected in October of 2015. Mr. Speaker, in Bill C-86, one of the things I think defines this government and defines the measures that we've introduced over the last 3 years is our poverty reduction targets. First of all, we're aiming to reduce poverty levels 20% below 2015 levels by 2020, and 50% below the level of poverty in 2015 by 2030. That is ambitious. Mr. Speaker, we put out a policy paper on that, Opportunity for All, Canada's first poverty reduction strategy, which I took a look at over the weekend. And it is telling of what our government's values are, the values for Canadians, how we're going to lift Canadians, but we're also going to ensure that those people that take risk are rewarded. Corporations are enjoying after-tax profit levels, if you measured by margins, at a very high level. They're doing well. Wage growth has rebounded from the previous government's era of policies that basically led to stagnation. Employees are doing well. Workers are doing well, and that's what our government is about. So if you look at our measures, the Canada Child Benefit, an extra $25 billion to families in Canada over 5 years since 2016. If you look at the Guaranteed Income Supplement, $647 million to be precise. I'm a numbers person, so I like to use numbers. $647 million, or roughly $3 or $4 billion over a couple years, helping 900,000 single seniors across Canada, our most vulnerable, lifting hundreds of thousands of them out of poverty. The Canada Workers Benefit, $3 billion over 5 years, lifting 70,000 Canadians out of poverty, helping 2 million Canadians from coast to coast to coast that are working hard. For someone earning approximately $15,000, it's an extra $500 a year. Mr. Speaker, those are our policies, but those are a value statement of where our government has taken this country. 2017, we had 3% economic growth. This year, around 2 and change. We're going the right way. Recently we had the Bank of Canada Governor visit Finance Committee, the committee that I get the pleasure to sit on, and he stated that our economy is moving along, chugging along nicely, benefiting from strong export growth and good business investment levels. We've seen that, and Mr. Speaker, we should be proud of that. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-86 also introduces a number of measures that I think will benefit my kids in the future. Pay equity legislation to ensure that equal value for equal work happens, that women benefit, that my 2 daughters at home will know that the work they do will be rewarded the same as others. That is very important. That should be applauded. Mr. Speaker, we've introduced and said that the Ministry for Women is a full ministry, getting full resources. Again, we must remove structural barriers that women face in this country. We must also help other countries pursue those endeavors, because we know that for Canada to truly succeed and for Canada's economy to truly succeed, all Canadians must be full participants, underrepresented groups and all Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of Bill C-86. There's a lot in it. There's a lot we went through during committee, but there's a lot that will strengthen our foundational economy and move us forward. And Mr. Speaker, we'll do it in a very measured, prudent way. As many of you know here, and many of my colleagues have repeated this a few times, I spent approximately 22 years in the global financial markets in New York City, in Toronto, and I was a credit rating analyst, which basically means I looked at the ratings of both corporations and sovereigns. In Canada's AAA rating, thanks to former Finance Minister Paul Martin, has been there since our government many years ago, and it will maintain there. Our fiscal anchor, our fiscal target of a targeted debt to GDP ratio is going to decline. It's going to hit, I think, about 28.5% in the 2023 to 2024 period. Again, undertaking measures that will strengthen our economy, help the middle class, help those Canadians wishing to join the middle class, and do it in a measured, prudent manner. And that's what you see in many of the measures in C-86. One of the things that's kind of emphasized by economists is this thing called labour force participation rates. And what we see now in Canada, looking at just working age 15 to 64-year-olds in Canada, we are at the highest, if my memory serves me correct, the highest rate of labour force participation rate in our history. Why is that? Yes, we've created 550,000 jobs in Canada, a majority of full-time, a majority from the private sector. And when I say we, I say that very humbly because it's risk takers across this country, entrepreneurs, small business owners, like the ones back in my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, very successful people, investing their time, their resources, taking risk, and yes, hiring and employing folks. And that needs to be singled out. And what's happened is labour force participation rates have risen for all groups, for women, underrepresented groups, and that's what we need. That's what we need to succeed, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're seeing. And the measures in C-86 are those type of measures. Pay equity legislation. Groundbreaking. A ministry, I don't want to misspeak, for women. Child rearing drop-in positions. A new parental sharing benefit, and they say the sincerest form of flattery is imitation. I'm not sure if I said that backwards or forwards. And those provisions are similar to the ones that are used in the province of Quebec. When two parents can share benefits, they get an extra couple of weeks. And what's happened is, in Quebec, the labour force participation rate for women is much higher than in other parts of the country. So with this, we'll improve that. We've learned a measure there from La Belle Provence. Mr. Speaker, on the poverty reduction targets, I cannot emphasize this anymore. We will be going from 1 in 8 in poverty, about 12% of the population today, to about 1 in 10 in 2020, 10%, and we've targeted 1 in 17, which is roughly 6%. Currently, we've actually lifted 650,000 Canadians out of poverty by the measures that we've introduced in the last 3 years. That is something we need to recognize, but we need to recognize there's more work to be done. I often like to say that, we've done a lot for our economy. I'm an economist. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've created 550,000 jobs, attracting a lot of investment. LNG approved in my home province of British Columbia, because that's where I was born and raised. A lot of really, really good things. But, Mr. Speaker, our work is never done until all Canadians can succeed, have a good job with benefits, good pay, and provide for a brighter future for themselves and, most importantly, their families, like many of us do here. That is what is important. That is the material and the measures in Bill C-86. Those are the measures that I had the pleasure of reading and debating in committee. We've also done some other things that Canadians will benefit from. We've improved their protections when they go visit a bank or financial institutions. We've introduced measures to make sure that all organizations, all high net worth individuals, all corporations pay their fair share of taxes. We continue to do that. We have invested $1 billion into CRA in the last 2 or 3 years to ensure that they have the resources, the tools to go after those that aren't paying their fair share. In my riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, I'm blessed to have a number of entrepreneurs. They're going to benefit come 2019, January 2019, when our small business tax rate goes from 11%, we've moved it down to 10, now we're moving it down to 9%, a saving of $7,500 annually for those small business owners that work tirelessly day in and day out. Mr. Speaker, those are my humble thoughts this morning on Bill C-86, and I look forward to questions and comments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.